Tonight we're going to take a deep dive into what dating was like in the Victorian era. If you think modern dating is tough, with apps, messages, and mixed signals, you'll be amazed at what the Victorians had to deal with. It was a whole other world filled with etiquette books, chaperones, and an entire set of rules for every interaction between men and women. In the 1852s, even making eye contact was governed by a set of rules. Lifting a hat could be as meaningful as sending a text message, and receiving a gift from the wrong person, well, that could ruin your reputation forever. Before we get into all that, if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or a subscribe. I'm always curious about where you're all tuning in from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's amazing to think people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Now, let's get comfortable. Take a deep breath, settle in wherever you are, and let your body relax into whatever you're lying on. We're going to travel back to May 1855, right to the heart of London. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be really glad for whatever mattress you're on. The Victorians had a saying about love, but it wasn't what you might think. Back then, making love meant courtship, learning how to woo someone the proper way. And if you wanted to survive the dating scene of the Victorian era, you had to know the rules. So congratulations, you just woke up in May 1855, in the middle of London. But not the London you're used to. This is Queen Victoria's London, where the air is thick with coal smoke, and horses clatter on the cobblestones outside your window. The smell, it's unforgettable. The Thames carries the waste of 2.5 million people, and on warm days that scent drifts right through your window. You pull your wool blankets up to your chin, wrinkling your nose at the smell. But hey, at least you're 22. From a respectable middle-class family. Your father owns a successful haberdashery, so you've got enough to get by, but not enough to lounge around all day. The bad news? Well, you're a woman in 1855, which means your whole future depends on one thing: finding the right husband. And let me tell you, the rules for doing that were complicated, kind of like learning to dance the waltz while juggling teacups. You stretch your legs under your rough cotton sheets, feeling the weight of the heavy quilt on your chest. There's no central heating here, won't be invented for decades. So every morning starts with a cold chill that seeps through the stone walls. Your housemaid's been up since 5 a.m. lighting the coal fires downstairs. You can hear her heavy footsteps as she brings up more coal to light the fire in your bedroom. That kettle weighs about 30 pounds when full, and she'll carry dozens of them up and down all day. The bedroom door creaks open, and Mary, your housemaid, enters. She's carrying the coal, her hands covered in soot, and she favors her left shoulder from all that heavy lifting. She kneels by the fireplace, expertly arranging the kindling and coal, her movements quick and practiced. The fire catches, spreading warmth through the room. "Good morning, miss," she says, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your mother says you need to dress properly today. The weather bees are coming to call this afternoon, and they're bringing their son." Your stomach flips. The weather bees. You've heard of their son, Thomas. HES 26, just returned from India, where he worked as a clerk for the East India Company. Your mother's been hinting at this visit for weeks, and you know what it means. This isn't just a friendly visit, this is an inspection. You sit up in bed, feeling the cool air against your shoulders as you pull your cotton nightgown tighter. The fire's already making the room warmer, but it'll be a while before the chill is completely gone. Mary moves around, laying out your best dress, the one made of dark blue wool with tiny mother minus pearl buttons. A dress your mother spent 3 months saving up for. "Mary," you say, still groggy, "what do you know about the weather bees, son?" She glances toward the door and leans in closer. "Well, miss, I heard from their housemaid that HES got all his teeth, which is more than most men his age can say. He doesn't drink too much, though he does like cigars. And of course, he's been in India for 4 years, so he might have picked up some strange ideas. You look at the corset laid out on the bed with resignation. Every morning Mary will lace you into it. It's made of whale bones and cotton, and it tightens around your ribs until you can barely breathe. But it creates that perfect hourglass shape that's all the rage right now. And you'll wear it all day feeling like someone's holding you tight from all sides. You swing your legs out of bed, your bare feet hitting the cold floor. The oak boards are smooth but cold, no matter how warm the fire gets. Mary immediately starts unlacing your nightgown. Privacy doesn't really exist for women. Mary's seen you undressed more times than you can count, and she'll continue dressing and undressing you, at which point your husband's valet or your lady's maid will take over. First, you slip into your chemise, a thin cotton undergarment that feels like a tea towel against your skin. Then comes the corset. Mary positions it around your waist and starts pulling the laces tight. With each pull, your breathing becomes more shallow. By the time she finishes, it feels like there's no room left for air. "Not too tight, Mary," you manage to say, but you both know it's already as loose as fashion will allow. "Of course not, miss. Your mother said you should be able to speak clearly when the gentleman calls." Next, you put on the layers of bustle pad to push out your skirt, 3 petticoats, and finally your dress. You end up wearing about 15 pounds of fabric. Then come the shoes, kid leather, soft and smooth, but flat. Heels won't be in fashion for another few decades. They button up the side with tiny pearl buttons that Mary fastens with a special hook. Your feet, wrapped in cotton stockings, feel secure but not exactly comfortable. These shoes weren't made for walking long distances. They were made for sitting gracefully in parlors and taking small, careful steps. While Mary arranges your hair into the fashionable style, parted sharply down the middle and swept back into a low bun with curls framing your face, you think about what the afternoon might bring. The Weatherby's visit is like a job interview, but the job is wife. The interview happens in the front parlor, where you'll sit with your parents and make polite conversation while they watch every word, every gesture, every expression. If Thomas Weatherby finds you suitable, he might ask your father for permission to call on you. If your father agrees, the formal courtship will begin, which could last anywhere from a few weeks to several months. During that time, you'll never be alone with him. Every conversation will happen under the watchful eye of a chaperone, usually your mother or Aunt Caroline, who lives with your family and has strong opinions about everything. Mary finishes with your hair and steps back to look at you. You glance at yourself in the small mirror on your dressing table. Your face is pale, just the way fashion dictates, since a tan means you work outside like a servant. Your lips are their natural color. Makeup is considered improper for unmarried ladies. Your eyebrows are dark and well shaped. The effect is supposed to suggest innocence, modesty, and good breeding. "You look lovely," Miss Mary says, and you can tell she means it. "Shall I bring up your breakfast, miss?" Mary asks as she steps back. You nod, still processing the whirlwind of preparations. A moment later, breakfast arrives, a tray with porridge and a small amount of cream, toast with butter, and tea that's strong enough to wake the dead. The porridge is filling but bland. The toast, on the other hand, is surprisingly good, fresh from the kitchen. The tea is exactly what you need to wake up completely. You eat carefully, mindful of the tight courses and the fact that any spill will show on your dark dress. After breakfast, your mother appears in your doorway. At 45. She's still a striking woman, though the years of raising children and constant worrying have left fine lines around her eyes. She's wearing her second best dress, a dark brown wool dress with black trim, and her hair is arranged similarly to yours, but much more severe. "Good morning, dear," she says, stepping into your room and closing the door behind her. "We need to have a talk before the Weatherbys arrive this afternoon." You set your teacup down, giving her your full attention. These talks usually mean something important. Now you know why the weather bees are coming. She begins, settling herself on the edge of your bed. Thomas needs a wife, and you need a husband. It's a practical arrangement, but that doesn't mean it can't be pleasant if you both behave properly. She pauses, smoothing her skirt. I've been corresponding with Mrs. Weatherby, and she's shared some things about her son that you should know. Hes well-educated, has prospects for promotion in his company, and saved a lot of money during his time in India. Hes also eager to settle down and start a family. You nod, though your stomach does a flip at the mention of starting a family. The physical aspects of marriage are never spoken about directly, but you know they hover over every courtship like a shadow. There are a few rules you absolutely must follow this afternoon, your mother continues. First, you must accept any gifts from him, no matter how small. A gentleman should not give gifts to a lady he is not engaged to, and accepting them suggests you're encouraging his attentions. This comes straight from the etiquette books your mother reads so carefully. The Young Lady's Friend, which was published in 1837, specifically warns that one gift will lead to another and encourages him to offer his heart. Your mother goes on, second, you must touch him in any way, though shaking hands unless hes formally introduced by your father. Even then, keep it brief. If he offers you his arm, you may take it lightly, but otherwise keep your hands folded in your lap. This may seem strange, but in 1855, any kind of physical contact between unmarried people is serious business. You think about how odd this must seem to young people today, where a handshake is nothing and hugs are common. But in 1855, even a handshake is a formal event, especially between unmarried men and women. Third, she continues, let him lead the conversation. Don't be afraid to show intelligence. He has been educated, and he'll appreciate a woman who can discuss something more interesting than the weather, but don't contradict him directly. If you disagree, find a gentle way to express it. Too much intelligence might make you seem unfeminine or threatening, and too little could make you look boring or silly. You've been practicing this balancing act your whole life. You think back to your years of learning how to speak, how to express yourself in polite company. This isn't just about getting a husband, it's about surviving the intricate rules of society, where every word and every gesture counts. Finally, your mother says, adjusting a curl near your ear, remember hes assessing you just as much as you're assessing him. Watch how he treats the servants, how he speaks to your father, how he responds when things don't go exactly as planned. These little things will tell you much more about his character than polite conversation ever will. She stands up, brushing an imaginary lint from her skirt. The Weatherbees will arrive at exactly 3's Erith, while serve tea and the cakes that cook made yesterday. You'll sit on the settee by the window lights best there. He'll sit nearby, and your father will join us after hes spoken with Mr. Weatherby about business matters. Your mother leaves, and you find yourself with several hours before the big event. You head downstairs to the small family library, which is more like a room with 2 bookcases and a window seat. You pick a book of poetry acceptable for young ladies to read, though novels are still considered somewhat questionable. You settle into the window seat, but your mind keeps drifting to the afternoon ahead. The house around you is slowly coming to life. You hear the cook banging pots in the kitchen, getting ready for the midday meal. The housemaid is sweeping the front steps twice a day, because of all the coal smoke and horse droppings in the street. Your father is in his study, going over the shop's accounts. The familiar smells of coal fire, beeswax polish, and lavender water fill the house. Through the window you watch the street outside. A milk cart rolls by with the driver calling out his wares. 2 ladies walk past, their skirts swaying with each step. They're wearing the same style of dress as you, dark colors, full skirts, tight bodices, but their fabric looks much more expensive. Behind them, their maid follows at a respectful distance, carrying their parcels. A gentleman on horseback rots by, his top hat perfectly positioned, his coat with tails and trousers, just the right color. When he passes your window, he tips his hat in polite greeting even though he doesn't know you. This is normal. Gentlemen are expected to acknowledge ladies with this small gesture of respect. The morning drags on. You read a few poems, help your mother arrange flowers for the front parlor, and practice a piece on the pianoforte. Playing music is one of the accomplishments expected of young ladies, along with speaking a bit of French, doing needlework, and possibly sketching. You're not expected to be great at any of these, just good enough to show you've had a proper education. Lunch is simple: cold meat, bread, cheese, and pickled vegetables. You eat lightly, partly because the corset makes a large meal uncomfortable, and partly because you're too nervous to have much of an appetite. Your mother chats about the neighbors and local gossip, but you can tell she's anxious too. A good marriage for you would solve several of the family's financial problems and secure your future. No pressure. At 2:30 a.m. Your mother announces it's time for final preparations. You head upstairs to check your appearance one last time. Mary has laid out fresh gloves, white cotton ones that button at the wrist, and a small locket, the only acceptable jewelry for an unmarried lady receiving visitors. The locket contains a portrait of your grandmother undressed just below the high neckline of your dress. You practice sitting down gracefully, which isn't as easy as it sounds when you're wearing so many layers. The trick is to lower yourself slowly, letting your skirts settle around you in an attractive way. Then, you fold your hands in your lap, trying to look elegant and poised. Getting up requires pushing down on the arms of the chair and rising smoothly without showing any effort. At 2:50 a.m., you're in position in the front parlor, sitting on the settee, just as your mother instructed. She's sitting nearby in her chair, needlework in her lap to keep her hands busy. Your father stands by the fireplace, checking his pocket watch every few minutes. The room smells of beeswax, fresh flowers, and lavender water. The afternoon light streams through the windows, and you hope your mother's right about how flattering it is. The clock ticks toward 3 o'clock a.m., and every second seems to last forever. Your palms are damp inside your gloves, and you resist the urge to fidget with your skirt. This is it, the beginning of what could be the rest of your life. At exactly 3 o'clock a.m., there's a firm knock at the front door. Your father opens it, and you hear low voices in the entrance hall, formal greetings, coats being removed, walking sticks being placed in the umbrella stand. Then, footsteps approach the parlor, and your heart hammers against the corset. Mr. Weatherby enters first. Thomas' father, a distinguished gentleman with silver whiskers and a slight stoop from years of bending over account books. Behind him comes Mrs. Weatherby, a round woman in burgundy silk, her jewelry glinting in the light. And then Thomas steps through the doorway. He's taller than you expected, with brown hair parted precisely in the middle and mutton chop whiskers framing a lean face. His skin carries a golden undertone from his years in India. When he moves, there's a careful precision to his gestures, as if H.E.S. had military training. H.E.S. wearing a black frock coat that reaches his knees, great trousers, and a white shirt with a high collar that looks like it might strangle him if he turns too quickly. Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby, your father says formally, "May I present my wife, Mrs. Hartwell, and my daughter, Miss Elenina Hartwell?" You rise from the settee slowly, gracefully, letting your skirt fall around you as you've practiced 1,000 times. You offer a small curtsy, just a dip of your knees and a slight incline of your head. Too deep would suggest you're of lower status. Too shallow would seem disrespectful. "Miss Hartwell," Mrs. Weatherby says warmly, "what a pleasure to finally meet you." Thomas has been quite eager for this introduction. Thomas steps forward and offers a brief bow. "Miss Hartwell, His voice is deeper than you expected, with just a hint of an accent you can't place, maybe something he picked up during his time in India. You reply, meeting his eyes briefly before lowering your gaze. Direct eye contact is acceptable for the initial greeting, but prolonged staring is considered bold and improper. Everyone settles into their assigned positions like actors taking their marks on a stage. Thomas sits in the chair across from you, close enough for conversation but far enough to maintain propriety. The parents sit nearby, engaged in polite conversation about mutual acquaintances and local news, acting as subtle chaperones. I trust your journey from India was pleasant. You venture, since it's acceptable for ladies to ask about travel. Indeed, Thomas replies. The rather lengthy 3 months aboard ship gives one plenty of time to reflect. I was quite ready to return to English soil and English society. He pauses. The climate there can be challenging for those of us unaccustomed to its intensity. You nod sympathetically, though you've never been farther from London than Brighton. I imagine the heat must be overwhelming. We complain when our summers reach 70 degrees. Quite so, he replies. In Bombay we often saw temperatures above 100 degrees, with humidity so thick it felt as though the very air was a heavy soup. He shifts in his chair, and you notice he unconsciously loosens his collar slightly. I confess, I developed a great appreciation for English rain after my time abroad. This draws a small smile from you, genuine this time. Rain is certainly something we have in abundance. The conversation continues in this careful dance. Thomas talks about the markets in Bombay, the exotic fruits he learned to enjoy, the challenges of managing clerks who spoke a dozen different languages. You share your much smaller experiences, books you've read, music you've practiced, your observations about life in London. But you're also watching him closely, just like your mother advised. When Mary enters to serve tea, you notice how Thomas politely nods to her, a small gesture of respect that many gentlemen wouldn't bother with. When your father cracks a joke about the weather, Thomas laughs, not the forced chuckle of social obligation, but genuine amusement that reaches his eyes. And when Mrs. Weatherby accidentally knocks over her teacup, spilling hot liquid across the table, Thomas immediately rises to help, producing a clean handkerchief without a word. Oh, how clumsy of me, Mrs. Weatherby flutters, dabbing at the spill. Not at all. Your mother reassures her, while Mary quickly appears with a cloth to clean up the mess. These things happen. But you've noticed something else. When the teacup clattered to the floor, Thomas flinched. Not just the usual startle response, but something deeper. His hands tensed for a brief moment, and his eyes darted toward the door, as if he was considering an escape route. It lasted only seconds before he regained his composure, but you file the observation away. Something about sudden loud noises seems to affect him more than it should. The formal part of the visit lasts exactly 1 hour, as etiquette demands. Any shorter would suggest disinterest, and any longer would be considered too forward. As the Weatherbys prepare to leave, Thomas asks your father for a private word. The conversation takes place in the hallway, just out of earshot but visible from the parlor. You watch your father nodding a few times. Thomas gestures occasionally as he speaks, his hands moving with that same careful precision you've noticed before. After about 5 minutes they shake hands, and your father's expression suggests the conversation went well. Miss Hartwell, Thomas says, returning to the parlor, with your father's permission, I would be honored to call on you again, perhaps Sunday afternoon if that would be agreeable. Your heart skips a beat. This was it, the formal beginning of courtship. That would be very pleasant, Mr. Weatherby, you reply, your voice steady, but your chest is fluttering inside. After they leave, your mother immediately begins her post-visit analysis. Well, he seems quite respectable, she says, settling back into her chair. Good posture, clean fingernails, polite to the servants. And did you notice how he helped when I spilled the tea? That shows consideration. Your father joins in. He saved quite a respectable sum during his time in India. Enough to establish a household without needing assistance from either family. And his prospects with the company are sound. But your mind drifts back to the moment the teacup fell the way. Thomas flinched, the sudden tension in his posture, the tightness around his eyes when he spoke about the climate in India. There's more to him than meets the eye. The formal courtship process doesn't reveal it all, but you're paying close attention to the small details. Sunday arrives with an unseasonable warmth for late May. You're dressed in your second minus best gown, a pale green cotton dress with tiny white flowers that your mother says brings out your eyes. This time, there's no corset struggle, no nervous breakfast. You're starting to understand the rhythm of these visits. Thomas arrives precisely at 2 o'clock a.m., carrying a small bouquet of flowers. It's perfectly acceptable because flowers are temporary and modest, unlike jewelry or books, which could imply a deeper intent. He's dressed more casually today in a brown coat and lighter trousers, looking relaxed. Miss Hartwell, he says, offering the flowers with a slight bow. I noticed these growing in my mother's garden and thought you might enjoy them. Sweet peas, delicate purple and white blossoms that smell like spring and innocence. As you take them, your gloved fingers brushes for just a moment, and you feel a small electric shock that has nothing to do with static from your wool dress. They are lovely, you say, burying your face in the fragrant petals to hide the flush rising in your cheeks. Sweet peas are my favorites. I hope they might be, he replies. And there's something in his tone that suggests this was no casual choice. This visit feels different from the first. With the formalities out of the way, the conversation flows more easily. Thomas talks about his childhood, growing up as the youngest of 4 sons, always striving to prove himself worthy of attention. You share stories of your education, the small school you attended where you learned French drawing, and just enough math to manage household accounts. I confess, Thomas says during a lull in the conversation, I find London rather overwhelming after 4 years in smaller communities. The noise, the crowds, the pace of everything. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten how to be properly English. This admission surprises you. Gentlemen aren't supposed to express uncertainty or weakness. But here he is, acknowledging that returning home hasn't been as smooth as expected. Perhaps you say carefully, it's not about being properly English, but about finding your own way of being English. 4 years is a long time. You've experienced things most of us can't even imagine. He looks at you with something approaching surprise, as if he hadn't expected such understanding. You're very perceptive, Miss Hartwell. Over the following weeks, Sunday visits become routine. Thomas calls every Sunday at 2 o'clock a.m., staying for exactly 1 hour. Sometimes you sit in the parlor, sometimes you walk in the small garden behind your house, always with a chaperone in sight. The conversations grow deeper, more personal, though still within the boundaries of propriety. You learn that Thomas has nightmares sometimes. He mentions it when explaining why he often looks tired on Monday mornings. You discover that he writes poetry, though he's too embarrassed to share any with you. He tells you about the strange foods he learned to enjoy in India, the festivals he witnessed, and the complexities of managing business relationships across cultural divides. In return, you share your carefully guarded thoughts, your frustrations with the limits placed on women's education, your secret ambition to travel, to see places beyond London, your love for novels, though you're careful not to mention the more scandalous ones you borrow from your friend Catherine. During your 4th Sunday visit, Thomas makes a request that sends your pulse racing. Miss Hartwell, he says, glancing toward where your mother sits with her needlework, I wonder if you might consent to accompany me to the exhibition at the Crystal Palace next Saturday, with proper chaperone aid. Naturally, this is a big deal. Attending a public event together is a semi-minus public declaration of your courtship. It's official. Of course I would be delighted, you reply. Your voice barely steady despite the excitement fluttering in your chest. Saturday arrives bright and clear. You're dressed in your absolute best, a deep blue silk dress that took your mother 6 months to save for, with a matching jacket and a small hat adorned with ribbons. Your gloves are pristine white kid leather, and you carry a small beaded reticule containing your handkerchief, smelling salts, and a few coins. Thomas arrives with a hired carriage, an open landau, that will allow for proper supervision while still providing the thrill of traveling together. Aunt Caroline, chosen as chaperone for her stern demeanor and sharp eyes, settles herself in the facing seat. Her expression is a mix of determination and vigilance, her hat with feathers pointing accusingly at anyone who might dare to misbehave. The drive through London is an adventure in itself. The streets are filled with carriages, omnibuses, carts, and horseback riders, all competing for space on roads that weren't ever designed to hold so much traffic. Street vendors shout their wares. Fresh flowers, penny a bunch, hot pies, meat pies, sweep your chimneys, soot away. Thomas points out landmarks as you pass them: the new Houses of Parliament with their Gothic towers, Westminster Abbey with its ancient stones blackened by coal smoke, and the bridges crossing the Thames, where barges wait their turn at the docks. The river itself is alive with traffic, steamboats belching black smoke, sailing ships with their forest of masts, and smaller boats ferrying goods back and forth. As you travel south of the river, the character of the neighborhoods changes. Gone are the grand squares and elegant terraces of central London. Here, the houses are smaller and packed closer together, the air thick with industrial smoke and the smells of overcrowding. It's the kind of place where people live too close together with little regard for proper sanitation. But then, as you climb Sydenham Hill, the Crystal Palace rises before you like something out of a dream. The massive glass and iron structure gleams in the sunlight, reflecting 1,000 tiny sparks of light. Gardens stretch in all directions, filled with exotic plants and elaborately designed flower beds that form intricate patterns when viewed from the palace's elevated terraces. It's magnificent, you breathe, forgetting for a moment to remain reserved. Indeed it is, Thomas agrees, offering you his arm as you step down from the carriage. Though I confess, it reminds me a bit of some of the palaces I saw in India. This Victorian confidence in iron and glass, human ingenuity. Inside the palace, you're immediately overwhelmed by the scale and variety of everything. The central nave stretches on seemingly forever, filled with fountains and towering exotic plants. There are exhibits on every subject imaginable: industrial machinery, collections of butterflies from across the world, displays of native crafts from the far reaches of the British Empire, and artistic installations that blend science with beauty. Thomas guides you through the crowds, always keeping an eye on your comfort. When the press of people gets too thick, he leads you toward quieter corners. When you pause to examine a display, he waits patiently without rushing you along. When Aunt Caroline announces she needs a refreshment, he immediately locates a tea room where she can rest her feet. It's during this break, as Aunt Caroline is absorbed in her scones and tea, that Thomas leans closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Miss Hartwell, I hope you won't think me presumptuous, but I find myself growing quite attached to these Saturday excursions, and to your company. Your heart skips. This is starting to cross the line into serious territory. I've enjoyed them as well, you reply quietly, barely above a whisper. I had hoped. He pauses, then clears his throat. I wonder if you might consider. Well, perhaps this isn't the right place to discuss such things. You know exactly what HES hinting on. This is the kind of conversation that should happen first with your father and then with you, certainly not in the middle of a public tea room with your chaperone only a few feet away. Perhaps you say carefully, such matters might be better discussed in a more private setting. He looks at you with a mix of understanding and something else you can't quite place. The moment feels charged, like something important has just shifted between you. The rest of the afternoon passes in a blur. You admire tropical birds whose feathers shimmer in colors that seem unreal. You watch a demonstration of the latest photographic techniques, which can capture someone's image in just minutes instead of hours. You sample fruits from far-off lands that you'll probably never see. But beneath all the wonder and excitement, there's an undeniable current running between you and Thomas, a sense of approaching change, of decisions that will shape your future together. By the time you return home, as the sun sets behind London's smoky skyline, you realize that something has shifted. You've crossed a threshold, and your life will never be quite the same again. Tuesday evening arrives with a thunderstorm that rattles the windows and sends sheets of rain hammering against the glass. You're in the parlor with your mother, working on embroidery by lamplight, when the front doorbell rings. It's past 8 o'clock a.m. Far too late for social calls. So when Mary appears in the doorway, looking flustered, you know something significant is happening. Begging your pardon, Mum, Mary says to your mother, but Mr. Thomas Weatherby is at the door. Says he needs to speak with the master urgently. Your mother's eyebrows rise nearly to her hairline. Your father appears from his study, newspaper still in hand, looking equally puzzled. Through the parlor window, you can see Thomas' hired carriage waiting in the rain, the horse stamping impatiently as water streams from its mane. Show him into the study, your father says after a moment's thought. Ella Lenina, you and your mother stay here. Of course, you stay, but you strain to hear every sound from across the hall. The murmur of male voices serious and low. Your father's occasional indeed, and Thomas' longer responses that you can't quite make out. The conversation lasts nearly 20 minutes, an eternity, when you're sitting still, embroidery hoop forgotten in your lap, your heart beating fast enough to make the cameo brooch on your collar tremble. Finally, footsteps approach the parlor. Your father enters alone, but his expression gives everything away before he even speaks. Ellen Nina, he says, and there's satisfaction in his voice mixed with something that might be relief. Mr. Weatherby has asked for permission to pay his addresses to you. I have given my consent. The embroidery hoop slips from your nerveless fingers and hits the floor with a soft thud. This is it. Thomas was to marry you. After 6 weeks of careful courtship, H.E.S. ready to make it official. He wishes to speak with you tomorrow afternoon. Your father continues, I told him to call it to Zereth. Your mother will be present, naturally, but he'll be permitted to make his proposal directly to you. Your mother lets out a small squeak of excitement that she immediately tries to suppress. Oh, Elenina, we must decide what you'll wear, and we should have cooked prepare something special. And perhaps we should move the good china from the cabinet. You gently interrupt, though your own excitement is making your hands shake slightly. Perhaps we should see what he has to say first. But deep down, you already know what Thomas will say. The question isn't whether he'll propose, it's whether you're really ready to accept him. Marriage in 1855 isn't like stepping into a relationship that can be easily ended if things don't work out. Once you say yes, your legal existence essentially disappears. Your property becomes his property. Your money becomes his money. Even your children, if you have them, will legally belong to him, not you. Yet, what choice do you really have? At 22, you're already reaching the age where whispers about being on the shelf will start if you remain unmarried. Your family can't support you forever, and Thomas seems kind, intelligent, and genuinely fond of you. In a world where many marriages are purely business arrangements, the prospect of affection feels like an incredible stroke of luck. Wednesday crawls by slowly. You change clothes 3 times before settling on a soft gray wool dress with violet trim. It's serious enough to show you understand the gravity of the occasion, but pretty enough to remind Thomas why he is proposing in the first place. Your hair refuses to cooperate, and Mary has to pin the complicated braided style twice before it stays properly. At exactly 2 o'clock a.m., Thomas arrives carrying a small velvet box that sends your stomach into a frenzy. He is wearing his best black coat and a fresh white shirt. His collar's so stiff it looks like it could cut his throat if he turns his head too quickly. His hands are shaking slightly as he removes his gloves. "Miss Hartwell," he says formally, though his eyes are warm. "Mrs. Hartwell," he nods to your mother, who has positioned herself in the corner chair with her needlework, close enough to supervise, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Uses on the edge of the settee, your back straight, hands folded in your lap. Thomas takes the chair across from you, the same arrangement as those first visits, but now everything feels different. Electric. Final. "Miss Hartwell," Thomas begins, then stops and takes a deep breath. "Elenina, if I may, I have spoken with your father, and with your permission, I would like to speak directly to your heart." This is the moment everything changes. You nod, not trusting your voice. "These past weeks of knowing you have been among the happiest of my life," he continues. "Your intelligence, your kindness, your strength of character, these qualities have made me realize that I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He slides from his chair to one knee beside the settee, the velvet box now openly displayed in his hands. "Elenina Hartwell, would you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife?" The ring inside the box is modest, but beautiful, a small diamond surrounded by tiny pearls, set in yellow gold. It's not flashy or ostentatious, but it's clearly been chosen with care and represents a significant expense for a man in Thomas' position. "Yes," you whisper, and then find your voice. "Yes, Thomas, I would be honored to accept." His relief is so obvious that you almost laugh. He takes your left hand in his, the first time you've touched without gloves, and slides the ring onto your fourth finger. His hands are warm and slightly rough, probably from his years overseas, and the touch sends a shiver up your arm. "There," he says softly. "Now it's official." From her corner, your mother makes a small sound, possibly a suppressed sob of happiness. When you look over, she's dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief while trying to appear absorbed in her embroidery. The rest of the visit passes in a blur of practical discussions. The engagement will be announced in next Sunday's paper. The wedding will take place in 6 months, giving you time to prepare it as well and for Thomas to secure a proper house. HES found a small house in Kensington, 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a tiny garden, available to rent come autumn. "I know it's not grand," Thomas says, his voice slightly apologetic, "but it's respectable. And it's near enough to my office that I can walk to work in good weather." "It sounds perfect," you assure him, and you mean it. The idea of having your own space to arrange as you wish feels like the most luxurious thing imaginable. After Thomas leaves, your mother immediately begins what she calls engagement planning. Let's prepare overnight what needs to be purchased, what needs to be sewn, which relatives need to be informed. The next few months will be a whirlwind of preparation, unlike anything you've experienced before. But first, there are the immediate changes that come with being officially engaged. Starting the very next Sunday, Thomas is allowed to take you on unchaperoned walks. The first time you step out together without your mother trailing behind feels like the most daring thing you've ever done. You walk slowly through the small park near your house, your hand resting lightly on Thomas' arm, marveling at this new freedom. For the first time in your courtship, you can speak without measuring every word for its appropriateness under parental supervision. "I confess," Thomas says as you pause beside a fountain where children are sailing toy boats, "I've been terrified for weeks that you might refuse me." "Were you really?" You ask, surprised. But surely you could tell I enjoyed your visits. Enjoyed them, he shakes his head, laughing softly. Yes, but enjoyment and willingness to marry are quite different things. He adjusts his grip on his walking stick. I know you're not the most exciting prospect. No title, no great fortune, and I come with some complications from my time abroad. You think about those moments when loud noises made him flinch, the careful way he sometimes held himself as if expecting pain. Everyone has complications, Thomas, you say quietly. The important thing is whether two people can face them together. He stops walking and looks at you with an expression you can't quite read. You're very wise for someone so young. I'm not that young, you protest. 22 is quite grown up. Of course it is, he says quickly. I didn't mean to suggest. I sometimes feel much older than my 26 years, he adds, almost as an afterthought. India has a way of aging a person. Over the following weeks, these unchaperoned walks become precious to both of you. Away from the formal constraints of parlor visits, Thomas begins to reveal more of himself. He tells you about the fever that nearly killed him during his second year in Bombay, about the colleague who cheated him out of a promotion, about the overwhelming relief he felt when the ship carrying him home finally cleared the harbor. You share your own secrets in return. Your fear that you're not naturally maternal enough to be a good mother. Your frustration with the limitations placed on women's education. Your secret dream of learning to paint with real skill, not just the watercolor dabbling deemed suitable for young ladies. Perhaps, Thomas suggests one afternoon as you sit on a bench watching sparrows hop around your feet, you could take proper painting lessons after we're married. We won't be wealthy, but we should be comfortable enough for small luxuries. The casual way he says after we're married makes your stomach flutter. It's becoming real, this future you're planning together. Along with the walks come other new privileges. Thomas is now allowed to visit you in the front parlor without formal supervision, though he is still required to leave before nightfall. During these visits you're allowed to hold hands, a simple intimacy that feels revolutionary after months of careful distance. The first time Thomas takes your hand in his, you're sitting on the settee, looking through a book of engravings he brought to show you scenes from India. His fingers intertwine with yours, warm and slightly calloused, and you're amazed by how natural it feels. Is this proper? You ask, though you make no move to pull away. Perfectly proper for an engaged couple, he assures you. Though I admit it feels rather scandalous after all those weeks of keeping my hands to myself. You laugh, and the sound surprises both of you. It's been a long time since you've laughed freely in Thomas' presence. Most of your interactions have been so careful, so measured. But engagement has brought new ease to your relationship. The letters start arriving the very week of your engagement. According to Victorian tradition, engaged couples are expected to write to each other regularly, especially when separated by business or family obligations. Thomas' work requires him to travel to the company's offices in Manchester for a week, and suddenly, you're learning to express your feelings on paper. My dear Elenina, his first letter begins. I have been gone only 2 days, yet I find myself missing our conversations more than I anticipated. Manchester is a busy city, full of the noise and smoke of industry, but I confess, I would trade all its bustling energy for another quiet walk through your neighborhood park. You spend an entire evening crafting your response, filling 3 pages with your own careful handwriting. You tell him about the books you're reading, the changes your mother is making to the house in preparation for the wedding, and the small daily details that seem so much more meaningful when shared with someone who cares about them. These letters become the foundation of your deepening relationship. In writing, Thomas is more eloquent than in person, less constrained by the formal requirements of polite conversation. He writes about his hopes for your marriage, his plans for the house in Kensington, and his gradual adjustment to English life after his years abroad. You discover that you too express yourself more freely in writing. You tell him about your fears as well as your hopes, your questions about what married life will actually entail, and your excitement about having a home of your own to manage. The gift exchanges begin in earnest as well. Beyond the engagement ring, Thomas presents you with a small locket containing his photograph, a formal portrait showing him in his best coat, looking serious but slightly younger than his actual age. You reciprocate with your own photograph, taken at a local studio. You're wearing your best dress, and your expression is composed, just as your mother has taught you. But the most intimate gift is yet to come. On a rainy Thursday afternoon in July, Thomas appears at your door carrying a small, wrapped package. He looks slightly embarrassed as he hands it to you. "This is rather unconventional," he says, "but I thought you might appreciate it." Inside the package is a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. What makes it special, however, is the inscription on the first page, written in thome, this careful script for Elenina to record all the thoughts too precious for ordinary conversation. You run your fingers over the smooth leather cover, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's beautiful, Thomas." "Thank you. I have one just like it," he admits, his voice soft. "I thought perhaps we might both keep journals during our engagement, not to share them necessarily, but to help us think through all the changes ahead." That night, alone in your bedroom, you make the first entry in your new journal. You write about the strange mixture of excitement and terror that comes with approaching marriage, about your growing affection for Thomas, and about the overwhelming nature of all the decisions that need to be made. The summer passes in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Your mother drags you to endless fittings for your wedding dress and the new clothes that will form your married wardrobe. The dress itself is a confection of white silken Brussels lace, costing more than your father's shop earns in 2 months, but it's considered essential for maintaining the family's social standing. You spend afternoons learning household management skills that your education had only touched on. Cook teaches you how to plan meals and manage food budgets. Mary shows you the proper care of fine linens and the best methods for removing different types of stains. Your mother drills you on the social obligations you'll face as a married woman, how to visit neighbors, manage servants, and host dinner parties. But perhaps the most important education comes from the married women in your family and social circle. Your Aunt Margaret, who has been married for 15 years, takes you aside for a series of conversations that no one else seems willing to have. "Marriage," she says bluntly, "is not like the novels make it seem. There will be wonderful moments, certainly, but there will also be difficult ones. Your husband will have moods you don't understand. You'll have days when you wonder what you've gotten yourself into." She pauses, studying your face. "And, Elenina, there are aspects of married life that no one discusses directly, but that you need to understand the physical aspects." Your face burns with embarrassment, but you force yourself to listen as Aunt Margaret carefully explains, in the most delicate of terms, what will be expected of you as a wife. It's not the romantic picture painted by the poetry you've read, but it's practical knowledge you desperately need. As summer turns to autumn, your wedding date approaches with alarming speed. The house in Kensington has been secured, and Thomas takes you to see it on a crisp September afternoon. It's smaller than your family home, but bright and cheerful, with large windows that let in plenty of light and a small garden just big enough for a vegetable patch. The kitchen is modern, Thomas points out, with built-in in storage and a proper range for cooking, not just an open hearth. You run your hands over the wooden countertops, imagining yourself preparing meals here, managing your own household. It's thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. It's perfect, you tell him, and you mean it. This will be your domain, your responsibility, your home. 2 weeks before the wedding, Thomas makes an unusual request. He asks if you would consider cutting a lock of your hair for him to keep, a token that will be with him always. It's a common custom among engaged couples, but it still feels incredibly intimate. Use it in front of your dressing table mirror while Mary carefully cuts a small section of hair from behind your ear where it won't be missed. The dark strands feel silky and alive in your palm as you wrap them in tissue paper. For Thomas, you tell Mary as you seal the packet, "A piece of me to carry with him." In return, Thomas presents you with a lock of his own hair, already carefully preserved in a small silver locket. "Something of mine to keep close to your heart," he says simply. The week before your wedding arrives with a flurry of final preparations. Relatives descend on your house like a friendly invasion. The wedding dress hangs in your wardrobe like a beautiful ghost of your future self. Your trustworthy collection of clothes, linens, and household items you bring to your marriage fills to large trunks that sit at the foot of your bed. Thomas calls every day now, sometimes twice, to check on arrangements and simply to see you. The formal distance of early courtship has given way to genuine affection and comfortable companionship. You find yourself looking forward to married life, not just as an inevitable step, but as an adventure you want to share with this particular man. On the Thursday before your Saturday wedding, Thomas takes your hands in the parlor and looks at you seriously. Elenina, he says softly, "I want you to know that whatever challenges we face as husband and wife, I will always strive to be worthy of the trust you're replacing in me." "I will strive to be worthy of yours," you reply, meaning every word. Outside, London bustles with its usual energy, carriages clattering past, vendors calling their wares, the constant hum of a city that never quite stops moving. But in this moment, in your family's parlor, with your hand in Thomas, the future feels both certain and full of wonderful possibilities. Saturday morning arrives grey and drizzling, the kind of London weather that makes everything look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. You wait before dawn in your childhood bedroom for the last time, listening to the familiar sounds of the house stirring to life around you. Cook is already banging pots in the kitchen 3 floors below, and you can hear your father's heavy footsteps as he paces the library, probably rehearsing the speech he'll give at the wedding breakfast. Your wedding dress hangs on the wardrobe door like a luminous ghost, the white silk and lace catching what little light filters through the rain-streaked windows. In a few hours, you'll put it on and become Mrs. Thomas Weatherby, trading your identity as Elenina Hartwell for an entirely new existence. Mary appears with your breakfast tray, but the usual porridge has been replaced with delicate toast points and wheat tea, your mother's concession to the likelihood that your nervous stomach won't tolerate anything heavier. Your hands shake slightly as you lift the teacup, and you notice Mary watching you with something between excitement and sympathy. "Nervous, miss?" she asks softly as she begins laying out your undergarments. Terrified, you admit, then immediately feel guilty for the confession. Young ladies are supposed to approach marriage with joy and anticipation, not gut-churning fear. But Mary just nods knowingly. "That's natural, miss. My sister said the same thing on her wedding morning. She said she felt like she was about to jump off a cliff without knowing what was at the bottom." The comparison doesn't exactly reassure you, but there's something comforting about knowing that other women have felt this same mixture of excitement and panic. Your mother bustles in shortly after breakfast, already dressed in her best gown of deep purple silk, a color that shows her status as mother of the bride while remaining appropriately subdued. Behind her comes Aunt Caroline, your cousin Margaret, and Mrs. Patterson from next door, all armed with pins, ribbons, and strong opinions about how your hair should be arranged. The process of getting dressed takes nearly 3 hours. First, the chemise-in cotton garment that feels like nothing against your skin. Then the corset, laced tighter than usual to give you the perfect silhouette for your wedding gown. Today, Mary pulls the laces until you can barely draw a full breath, but you don't protest. On your wedding day, Discomfort is expected in service of beauty. The bustle comes next, larger than your everyday one, designed to support the massive train of your wedding dress. 3 crinolines follow, each one adding volume and weight, until you feel like you're wearing a small tent. By the time the actual dress slides over your head, you're already tired from the sheer physical effort of carrying all these layers. But when Mary fastens the final pearl button and steps back, the reflection in your mirror takes your breath away. The woman looking back at you is elegant, sophisticated, beautiful in a way that your everyday self never manages to achieve. The dress transforms you into someone worthy of a proper Victorian wedding. Your hair has been arranged in an elaborate style with white silk flowers woven through the braids and curls. A delicate veil of Brussels lace, borrowed from your grandmother's wedding ensemble, cascades from a small tiara that catches the lamplight. Your only jewelry is Thomas' engagement ring and a simple strand of pearls that belong to your mother. You look like an angel, your mother whispers, and there are tears in her eyes that she's trying very hard not to let fall. The carriage rides the street. George's church feels both endless and far too short. Your father sits beside you and usually silent, occasionally reaching over to pat your gloved hand. Through the rain-minus spattered windows, you watch London go about its Saturday business. Street vendors still calling their wares, children dodging puddles, the constant flow of life that will continue exactly as before, even though your entire world is about to change. The church looms ahead, its stone facade darkened by years of coal smoke, but still impressive in its Gothic grandeur. Carriages line the street outside, and you can see wedding guests hurrying through the rain, their umbrellas creating a forest of black silk. Your father helps you from the carriage, careful not to step on your train. And suddenly, you're standing in the church vestibule, with rain drumming on the roof overhead and the scent of wet wool and old stone filling your nostrils. Through the heavy oak doors you can hear the murmur of voices as guests take their seats. "Ready, my dear?" your father asks, offering you his arm. You nod, not trusting your voice, and the doors swing open. The church is full. More people than you expected. Faces both familiar and strange turn toward you with that peculiar mixture of curiosity and sentimentality that weddings inspire. Candles flicker in the gray morning light, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The organist begins the processional, and suddenly, you're walking down the aisle on your father's arm, your train rustling behind you like autumn leaves. But all you can see is Thomas standing at the altar in his best black coat, with his hands clasped behind his back. When your eyes meet his, he smiles, not the formal social smile you've grown accustomed to, but something warmer and more personal. Something that says this isn't a performance or a social obligation, but the beginning of something real between the two of you. The ceremony itself passes in a blur of ancient words and ritual responses. You hear yourself promising to love, honor, and obey, to cleave unto Thomas, forsaking all others, to accept him as your wedded husband until death parts you. The weight of these vows settles around your shoulders like a heavy cloak. But when Thomas slips his mother's gold wedding band onto your finger, his hands are steady and warm. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the rector declares, and suddenly it's official. You are married. You belong to Thomas now, legally, socially, and in every way that matters to Victorian society. The kiss Thomas gives you is brief and chaste, appropriate for a church full of witnesses, but you feel the promise of more intimate moments in the gentle pressure of his lips against yours when you turn to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby. The world looks slightly different than it did an hour ago. The wedding breakfast takes place at your family home, which has been transformed for the occasion. The dining room table groans under the weight of an elaborate feast: roasted fowl, ham glazed with honey, fresh bread still warm from the oven, jellies and custards, and a 3-tiered cake decorated with sugar flowers that look almost real enough to smell. But you can barely eat between the tight corset and the nervous energy that has left you since morning. You sip champagne, a rare luxury that makes your head feel light and floaty, and smile until your cheeks ache as guests offer congratulations and advice. Uncle William's slightly red-faced from his own encounters with champagne, insists on giving an impromptu speech about the sanctity of marriage and the duties of wives. Aunt Margaret regales you with stories about the early days of her own marriage, most of which involve domestic disasters and misunderstandings that seem hilarious in retrospect, but probably weren't at the time. Thomas stays close to your side throughout the reception, occasionally touching your hand or murmuring reassurances when the social obligations become overwhelming. You notice how he deflects the more intrusive questions about your wedding trip and future plans, protecting your privacy even amidst all the celebration. When the last of the guests finally begins to leave, you feel the reality of your new life settling in around you. Tonight, you'll sleep in your new home as Thomas' wife. The physical intimacies that Aunt Margaret alluded to in her careful conversations will soon become your reality. The abstract concept of marriage will transform into daily domestic life with this man you've known for only a few months. By 5 o'clock a.m., the last of the guests have departed, leaving behind a house that looks like a party battlefield: empty glasses, crumpled napkins, chairs pushed out of alignment. Your mother is already directing the servants to clean up, but her eyes keep drifting to you with a mixture of pride and something else that might be worry. "Time to change into your traveling dress," she says gently, and suddenly your throat feels tight with unshed tears. The traveling dress is practical dark green wool with a matching jacket designed for the carriage ride to your new home and the beginning of your new life. As Mary unlaces your wedding gown for the last time, you feel like you're shedding one identity and stepping into another. Your father loads your trunks into Thomas' hired carriage while your mother fusses over final details. Do you have your gloves, your reticule? The small bag of personal items you'll need for tonight? Each question feels loaded with meaning you're not quite ready to examine. The goodbyes are harder than you expected. Your parents stand on the front steps. Your mother is crying openly now. Your father is attempting stoic dignity, but not quite succeeding. This house has been your entire world for 22 years, and now you're leaving it forever. "Write to us soon," your mother calls, as the carriage pulls away. "And remember what I told you about being a good wife." Thomas takes your hand as the familiar streets of your childhood disappear behind you. "Are you all right?" he asks softly. "I think so," you say, though you're not entirely sure. "It's just, everything is different now." "Yes," he agrees. "But different can be good, can't it?" The house in Kensington looks smaller than you remembered, but welcoming in the early evening light. Smoke rises from the chimney, suggesting that Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper Thomas hired, has been preparing for your arrival. The front garden is tidy, with late blooming roses that smell sweet despite the earlier rain. Thomas helps you from the carriage, and you notice how carefully he guides you up the front steps, as if you might break. The front door opens before you reach it, revealing Mrs. Davies, a comfortable looking woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Weatherby," she says, and the title sounds strange in your ears. "You're Mrs. Weatherby now." Nina Hartwell no longer exists. The house has been prepared for your arrival with obvious care. Fresh flowers in the front parlor, a fire burning cheerfully in the grate, and the scent of something delicious coming from the kitchen. Mrs. Davies leads you through rooms that are now yours to arrange and manage, explaining the household routine she's established and asking about your preferences for meals and daily schedules. Your bedroom, yours and Thomas now, overlooks the small back garden. The bed is larger than the one in your childhood room, with a white coverlet that looks crisp and inviting. Your trunks have already been delivered and sit waiting to be unpacked, full of the tracewell items you spent months accumulating. Thomas hovers in the doorway, suddenly seeming as nervous as you feel. "I'll leave you to it," he says, his voice softer than usual. "Mrs. Davies has prepared dinner for 7 o'clock. If that suits you." After he leaves, you sink into the small chair by the window and finally allow yourself to feel the full weight of the day. You are married. You are in your own home. Tonight, you will share that bed with a man who was essentially a stranger 6 months ago. Mrs. Davies appears with a tea tray and offers to help you unpack, but you find yourself craving a few minutes of solitude to process everything that's happened. She seems to understand, bustling away with promises to call you when dinner is ready. Dinner is served in the small dining room by candlelight. Just you and Thomas at opposite ends of a table that feels both intimate and formal. Mrs. Davies has prepared roasted chicken with vegetables from the garden, and everything tastes wonderful even though your appetite hasn't quite returned. Thomas tells you about the arrangements HES made for your first week of marriage. No visitors, no social obligations, just time for the two of you to adjust to living together. HES taken leave from his office, an unusual step that shows how seriously HES taking this transition. "I thought we might spend tomorrow arranging the books in the library," he suggests over the custard dessert. "And perhaps you'd like to see the kitchen properly to discuss meal planning with Mrs. Davies." These mundane domestic details feel both overwhelming and reassuring. This is what marriage actually is, not the romance of novels or the drama of wedding ceremonies, but the daily business of sharing a life with another person. After dinner, you sit together in the parlor, Thomas reading aloud from the evening paper while you attempt to focus on your embroidery. But the domestic tranquility feels fragile, underpinned by your awareness of what's expected to happen when you retire for the night. At 9 o'clock Mrs. Davies appears to bank the fires and secure the house for the evening. She bids you both good night with a meaningful look that makes your cheeks burn, and suddenly you're alone with your husband in your new home. "Elenina," Thomas says softly, setting aside his paper, "I want you to know that I understand this is all very new for you. We need NT, that is, there's no pressure for anything to happen quickly." His consideration touches you deeply, even as it highlights the strangeness of your situation. You know each other well enough to feel genuine affection, but not well enough to navigate the intimate physical relationship that now awaits you. "Thank you," you whisper. "That means a great deal to me." He reaches across the space between you and takes your hand. The same gesture that felt so revolutionary during your engagement now carries even deeper meaning. "We're going to be all right, aren't we?" he asks, his voice uncertain beneath the calm exterior. "Yes," you say, and find that you actually believe it. "We're going to be all right." The first days of marriage pass in a blur of domestic adjustment and small discoveries. You learn that Thomas likes his coffee strong and black, that he hums unconsciously while shaving, that he sometimes talks in his sleep, usually numbers and dates from his work accounts. He learns that you're not naturally early to rise, that you have strong opinions about how books should be organized, and that you make the most beautiful flower arrangements HES ever seen. Mrs. Davies proves invaluable in helping you establish your role as mistress of the household. She teaches you to plan menus that balance nutrition with budget, to manage household accounts, and to oversee cleaning and maintenance schedules. It's more complex than you expected, running even a small household, but deeply satisfying in ways you hadn't anticipated. You write your first letter as a married woman to your parents, describing your new home and your settling minus in process. The signature, your daughter, Elenina Weatherby, looks strange on the page, but less strange each time you write it. Thomas returns to work after a week, leaving you alone in the house with Mrs. Davies and your own thoughts. The solitude feels both liberating and slightly overwhelming. For the first time in your life, you're irresponsible for structuring your own days without parents, teachers, or social obligations to guide you. You spend the morning rearranging the parlor furniture to better catch the light from the windows. After lunch, you walk to the nearby shops to introduce yourself to the local merchants as Mrs. Weatherby of Elm Street. The baker, the grocer, the fishmonger all treat you with the respect due to a respectable married woman, and you begin to understand the social weight that comes with your new status. When Thomas returns that evening, you've prepared dinner yourself, a simple meal, but one you've cooked with your own hands in your own kitchen. The pride on his face when you tell him makes the effort worthwhile. You're turning into quite the housewife, he says, and there's admiration in his voice that makes your heart flutter. In learning, you reply, Mrs. Davies is a patient teacher. As weeks pass, you settle into the rhythm of married life. Thomas leaves for his office each morning after breakfast, returning in the evening with stories about his colleagues and the challenges of readjusting to English business practices after his years abroad. You fill your days with household management, correspondence with family and friends, and the slowly developing social obligations that come with your new status as a married woman. The physical intimacy that seemed so daunting on your wedding night develops gradually, naturally, as you grow more comfortable with each other. Thomas is patient and gentle, and you discover that the mysterious aspects of marriage that no one discusses directly are not as frightening as you'd imagined. Your first dinner party as a married couple takes place 6 weeks after your wedding. 3 other couples from the neighborhood, carefully chosen for their respectability and social compatibility, are invited. You spend days planning the menu with Mrs. Davies, polishing the good china, arranging flowers throughout the house. The evening goes well, conversation flows, the food is praised, and you receive several compliments on your hostessing skills. After the guests leave, you and Thomas sit in the parlor, feeling the satisfaction of a successful social debut. You were magnificent tonight, Thomas tells you, loosening his collar after hours of formal politeness. I was so proud watching you manage everything so gracefully. Were you really? You ask, still glowing from the evening's success. Absolutely, he says with a grin. You're going to be a wonderful addition to Kensington society. As autumn deepens into winter, you realize that you've successfully made the transition from daughter to wife, from girl to woman. The fears that seemed so overwhelming on your wedding morning have mostly faded, replaced by the comfortable routine of shared domestic life. You still miss your family home sometimes, still feel occasionally overwhelmed by the responsibilities of running your own household. But you've also discovered joys you hadn't anticipated, the satisfaction of creating a home. It reflects your own tastes, the pleasure of having time to pursue interests like painting and music without parental oversight, and the deepening affection between you and Thomas as you navigate daily life together. One snowy December evening, as you sit by the fire with your embroidery while Thomas reads his newspaper, you realize how completely your life has transformed in just a few months. The nervous girl who waited in her parents' parlor for Thomas Weatherby's first visit seems like a different person entirely. Thomas, you say softly, setting aside your needlework. He looks up for his paper, lamplight catching the gold flecks in his brown eyes. I just wanted to say I'm happy. Truly happy. His smile spreads slowly across his face, transforming his serious expression into something warm and boyish. So am I, my dear. So am I. Outside, London sleeps under its blanket of snow, but inside your small house in Kensington, you've built something precious together, a life that's entirely your own. Spring arrives early in 1856, bringing with it the kind of soft warmth that makes London's buildings look almost beautiful. You're in your garden, kneeling among the emerging daffodils, with dirt under your fingernails and sunshine warming your shoulders through your cotton work dress. This is a freedom you never had as an unmarried woman, the simple pleasure of getting your hands dirty in your own soil. Thomas finds you there when he returns from work, looking delighted rather than scandalized by your disheveled appearance. "You look like you've been wrestling with the earth and winning," he says, settling beside you on the small wooden bench he built last month. "The roses needed pruning," you explain, wiping your hands on the old apron you've started wearing for garden work. "And Mrs. Davies mentioned that the vegetable patch could use attention. I discovered I rather enjoy it." This is one of the unexpected joys of married life, the freedom to develop interests that might have been considered unsuitable for an unmarried lady. Your painting has improved dramatically now that you can hire a proper teacher, rather than relying on the superficial instruction deemed appropriate for young ladies. You've started reading novels that would have been forbidden in your parents' house, discussing them with Thomas over dinner like intellectual equals. "I have news," Thomas says, settling back against the bench with the satisfied expression of a man bringing home good tidings. "Peterson is retiring at the end of the year, and him being considered for his position. It would mean a substantial increase in salary." Your heart skips with excitement. Peterson's position would make Thomas a senior clerk with real responsibility and prospects for further advancement. More importantly, it would provide the financial security to start thinking about expanding your little household. "Thomas, that's wonderful," you exclaim. "Do you think you'll get it?" The manager seemed encouraging, he says, trying to contain his optimism but not quite succeeding. "He mentioned that my experience in India gives me advantages over the other candidates." Over dinner that evening, you discuss what Peterson's position might mean for your future larger house, perhaps with room for the children you both want, the ability to hire additional help for Mrs. Davies, maybe even a small carriage of your own instead of relying on hired vehicles for longer journeys. But you've also learned to appreciate what you already have. The intimacy of your small house, where every room holds memories you've created together. The satisfaction of managing your own domestic world. The way Thomas' face lights up when he comes home to find you waiting with stories about your day. Back in London, Thomas' promotion is confirmed, and the increase in salary offers new possibilities. You celebrate by taking a week's holiday in Brighton, your first trip together since your wedding. The seaside town is fashionable, full of couples your age, and you enjoy the novelty of being tourists together, exploring the pier, visiting the shops, and walking along the beach where the ocean stretches endlessly toward France. It's during this holiday that you realize you're probably expecting your first child. The signs are still subtle, slight queasiness in the mornings, unusual fatigue, a sensitivity to certain smells you've never experienced before. You decide to wait until you're certain before telling Thomas, but the possibility adds a golden edge to everything you see and do. Back in London, Doctors Matthews confirms your suspicions with the kind of gentle congratulations that doctors reserve for respectable married women. You're approximately 2 months along, he estimates, which means the baby will arrive sometime in early winter. That evening, you break the news to Thomas over dinner, watching his face transform from confusion to understanding to joy so pure it makes your throat tight with emotion. "Hey baby," he says, testing the words. Our baby, you confirm, and suddenly you're both crying and laughing at the same time. The pregnancy changes everything and nothing simultaneously. Your daily routines continue much as before, but now every decision is made with consideration for the child growing inside you. Mrs. Davies begins preparing the small room next to your bedroom as a nursery. Thomas becomes almost comically protective, insisting on carrying anything heavier than a teacup and worrying whenever you're out of his sight for more than an hour. Your mother visits more frequently now, full of advice about managing pregnancy and preparing for motherhood. Some of it is helpful. Some of it consists of old wives' tales that Mrs. Davies quietly contradicts, but you appreciate the connection to the generations of women who have navigated this mysterious transformation before you. The physical changes are gradual at first, then increasingly obvious as summer progresses. Your dresses require careful alteration to accommodate your expanding waist. You develop strange cravings for foods you've never particularly enjoyed and sudden aversions to smells that never bothered you before. The exhaustion of early pregnancy gives way to a period of remarkable energy, followed by the increasing unwieldiness of your final months. Thomas adapts to each stage with patient consideration. When you can no longer bend over to tend your garden, he takes over the weeding and watering. When walking becomes uncomfortable, he suggests quiet evenings at home rather than social visits. When you become too large to comfortably share your usual chair in the parlor, he immediately purchases a wider one designed specifically for your changing needs. You're being ridiculously considerate, you tell him one October evening as he helps you settle into your new chair. Cushions arranged just so. In being appropriately considerate, he corrects with a smile. You're recreating a human being. That seems to merit some extra attention. The baby arrives on a snowy December morning, 3 days after your second wedding anniversary. The labor is long and difficult, but when dry, Matthews finally places your daughter in your arms. The pain becomes irrelevant. She's perfectly formed and remarkably alert, with Thomas' brown eyes and what promises to be your stubborn chin. "She's beautiful," Thomas whispers, settling carefully beside you on the bed to get his first close look at his daughter. "She looks just like you say, marveling at the tiny fingers that grip yours with surprising strength. "She looks like herself," you add with a quiet laugh. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." You name her Charlotte, after the author whose novels you've grown to love despite their scandalous reputation. Charlotte Weatherby, a name that sounds both proper and slightly adventurous, which seems fitting for a daughter who arrived during a blizzard with obvious opinions about the timing. The first months of motherhood are exhausting in ways you never anticipated. Charlotte proves to be a demanding baby who sleeps fitfully on nurses frequently. Mrs. Davies hires her and Sarah to help with the additional laundry and cleaning, but much of the responsibility falls to you. Thomas helps as much as Victorian convention allows, taking over the night feedings when possible and entertaining Charlotte while you rest during the afternoons. "I had no idea babies were such tyrants," you confess to Thomas one morning after a particularly difficult night. "She has very strong opinions for someone who can't even hold her head up properly," he responds with a grin. "She's definitely your daughter." As Charlotte grows from a demanding newborn to an alert infant and then to a curious toddler, your household settles into new rhythms. Thomas' career continues to advance. Peterson's position has led to additional responsibilities and the promise of further promotion. You've started writing in earnest, beginning with articles for women's magazines about household management and child-rearing, then gradually moving toward more ambitious projects. Your second child, James, arrives when Charlotte is 2 years old, followed 18 months later by little Mary. The house in Kensington, once perfectly adequate for 2 people, becomes delightfully chaotic, with 3 small children and the additional staff needed to manage them. By your 5th wedding anniversary, you and Thomas have become pillars of your small community. Thomas serves on the church vestry and the local school board. You organize charitable events for poor mothers and children, drawing on your own experience to advocate for practical assistance rather than moral lectures. Your dinner parties are known for their lively conversation and excellent food, and young couples often seek your advice about the early challenges of marriage. One evening in late spring, as you're putting Charlotte to bed while Thomas reads to the younger children in the nursery next door, she asks a question that takes you by surprise. "Mama, how did you know Papa was the right person to marry?" You pause in your brushing of her dark curls, considering how to explain the complex process of Victorian courtship to a 5-year-old. Well, darling, you say after a moment, we spent time getting to know each other very carefully. We talked about important things and discovered that we enjoyed each other's company. But how did you know he would be a good papa? This is more difficult to answer. The Thomas who courted you so formally was kind and considerate, but you had no way of knowing he would become the father who builds elaborate dollhouses for his daughters and teaches his son to identify every type of tree in the park. I suppose I didn't know for certain, you admit, but I knew he was gentle and honest, and that he cared about other people's feelings. Those seemed like qualities that would make someone a good father as well as a good husband. After Charlotte falls asleep, you find Thomas in the parlor with a book, but he sets it aside when you settle beside him on the sofa you purchased to accommodate your growing family. Charlotte asks me how I knew you would be a good father, you tell him. And what did you say? He asks, his voice full of interest. That I recognize the qualities that matter: kindness, honesty, consideration for others. You pause, studying his face in the lamplight. I was right, wasn't I? I hope so, he says quietly. I certainly try to be. As your children grow and your marriage deepens, you often think about the elaborate social machinery that brought you and Thomas together. The etiquette books with their rigid rules, the chaperones who supervised every interaction, the formal dances of courtship that now seem almost quaint in retrospect. Yet somehow, despite all those constraints and conventions, something real and lasting emerged. Two people who might never have met under different circumstances found each other and built a life together. Not the dramatic passion of romantic novels, but something more sustainable. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of affection that grows stronger rather than weaker over time. On quiet evenings when the children are asleep and the house is peaceful around you, you and Thomas still sit together, reading or talking about the day's events. The conversation flows as easily as it did during those early walks in the park, but now it's enriched by years of shared experience and common purpose. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met? You ask him one such evening, looking up from the letter you're writing to your cousin in Scotland. Sometimes, he admits, though I can't imagine it clearly anymore. This life with you and the children feels like the only real possibility. The world around you is changing rapidly. Railways have revolutionized travel, making it possible to visit distant relatives in hours rather than days. Gas lighting is becoming common in better neighborhoods, pushing back the darkness that once defined winter evenings. Photography is growing more sophisticated, allowing families to preserve images of their children at every stage of growth. But the fundamental rhythms of domestic life remain constant. Children still need to be fed and clothed and educated. Households still require management and care. Marriages still depend on daily kindness and consideration between partners who have chosen to link their fates together. Looking back on your journey from a nervous young woman to a confident wife and mother, you're struck by how the elaborate social structures of Victorian courtship, for all their rigidity and artificial, served an important purpose. They provided a framework within which two relative strangers could evaluate each other's character and compatibility before making a commitment that would shape the rest of their lives. The constraints that once seemed so oppressive, the constant supervision, the formal rules of interaction, the careful progression from acquaintance to engagement, created a space for gradual discovery. You and Thomas learned to know each other's minds before you shared physical intimacy, to appreciate each other's characters before you committed to a shared future. Modern young people, you suspect, might find such restrictions impossible to tolerate, but there was something to be said for the patience those conventions enforced, the careful building of a relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. As you blow out the lamp and prepare to join Thomas upstairs, you feel a deep gratitude for the peculiar social machinery that brought you together. without those etiquette books and chaperones, without the formal structure of calling hours and supervised walks, you might never have discovered that the serious young man from India and the nervous young woman from London could create something beautiful together. Your story began with a knock at the door on a spring afternoon in 1855 when two carefully dressed people sat in a flower-filled parlor and tried to determine whether they could build a life together. It continues now in a house full of children's laughter and the comfortable silence of a couple who have learned to be truly at home with each other. The Victorian era, with all its rigid propriety and elaborate social rules, created the framework within which love could grow slowly and surely, like roses carefully tended in a walled garden. And sometimes, just sometimes, that patient cultivation produced something rare and lasting. A partnership that could weather the storms of illness and change, the challenges of parenthood and responsibility, and the simple daily work of caring for another person's happiness as carefully as your own. In the end, that's what dating was like in the Victorian era, not the spontaneous passion of modern romance, but something more deliberate and perhaps more durable. A careful dance that allowed people to discover whether they could trust each other with their futures, their dreams, and their deepest hopes for happiness. As you drift towards sleep in the bed you've shared for 7 years now, Thomas is breathing steady beside you, and the house is quiet around your sleeping children. You understand that you've been part of something larger than your individual story. You've participated in one of humanity's most enduring endeavors, the ancient dance of courtship and commitment, played out according to the particular rules of your time and place. The world will continue to change, and future generations will find their own ways of discovering love and building families. But the fundamental human longing for connection, for partnership, for someone to share the joys and sorrows of life with, will remain constant no matter how dramatically social conventions evolve. And maybe, just maybe, there was wisdom in taking time, in moving slowly, in building love on a foundation of friendship and respect rather than passion alone. Maybe the Victorians, for all their restrictions and formalities, understood something important about the patient work of creating lasting happiness with another human being. The last thing you remember before sleep claims you is Thomas' hand finding yours across the space between your pillows, a gesture that has become as natural as breathing after all these years of marriage. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and pleasures, but tonight, you rest in the security of knowing that you've chosen well, that the careful dance of Victorian courtship led you to exactly where you belong. As the years pass, the days of courtship and the wedding itself become distant memories, but their echoes are woven into the fabric of your life. What once seemed like a maze of rules, rituals, and proper decorum now feels like the steady foundation on which you've built your world. Together, you and Thomas have cultivated something lasting, something beyond the fleeting passion of young love, a partnership rooted in mutual respect, shared struggles, and quiet affection. The children grow quickly, each milestone a reminder of how swiftly time moves. Charlotte, now a curious and bright young girl, often asks you questions that make you smile, questions about the world, about love, and about how you and Thomas became who you are today. You find yourself reflecting on the complexities of your own journey, realizing how much you've changed, how much you've grown. The house in Kensington, once a symbol of your new beginning, now feels like home in every sense. You manage the household with skill, nurture the family you've built, and find joy in the small, everyday moments. And in those moments, you realize that the life you've built with Thomas, the love you've found, is not just the result of the careful courtship that brought you together, but of the work and dedication you both pour into each day. Thomas continues to thrive in his career, and together you've become respected members of your community. The garden you once tended with such delight has grown lush and full, a reflection of the care you've invested in your marriage, your family, and the life you share. You've seen the transformation of the world around you, industrial progress, changing fashions, and evolving social dynamics, but within the walls of your home, time seems to slow. The rhythm of your life together has found its own pace, steady and true. As the years turn to decades, you often find yourselves reminiscing about the early days of your marriage, the nervousness, the awkwardness, and the joy of discovering each other. But those feelings are long past. Now, when you sit together in the evenings, Thomas still holds your hand as he did in those early days, but now with a deeper understanding of each other. And though there's less excitement, less of the thrill of unknown possibility, there's something richer, something more profound in the connection you share. Your children grow, and you watch them navigate the world with the same care and thoughtfulness that Thomas showed you all those years ago. You find yourself passing on the lessons of patience, respect, and understanding that have guided you both, knowing that these values will continue to be carried on, even beyond your lifetime. When you look at Thomas, as you often do, whether across the dinner table or during quiet evenings by the fire, you realize that your life together has been a journey of shared discovery, not just of each other, but of the world. You've learned that love, in its truest form, isn't about grand gestures or fleeting moments of passion. It's about commitment, compromise, and the willingness to walk beside someone through the good days and the hard ones, knowing that together you can face anything. And now, as you sit side by side, watching the years unfold with children, grandchildren, and the peaceful rhythm of a life well lived, you find yourself at peace with the path you've taken. The dance of courtship that once seemed so slow and deliberate has blossomed into a lifelong partnership, one that has weathered the storms and flourished in the calm. As the sun sets on yet another evening in your beloved home, you hold Thomas' hand, your heart full of gratitude for the quiet, steady love that has filled your life. And you know without a doubt that the slow, careful steps you took all those years ago, guided by the rules of a society now long gone, were the right ones. Because in the end, it's not the rules or the rituals that make a marriage, it's the bond that forms between two people who are willing to give each other their hearts, not just for a time, but forever.